But it was all very serious. And before we got down to the regular meeting, we all had jobs to do when we got home. You never got away from Neil without having a job to do.
I know. The one thing I remember with meetings with you and Governor Williams, you would speak up. You know, a lot of people would be hesitant. I remember you shaking your finger in his face and saying, "Now, Governor, listen." And he listened. Am I correct on that?
Well, Menon was like that. He was sincere. You know, I used to go to the meetings in the Capitol regularly, and there were people among them who, the first we no sooner got elected the governor than they were trying to get him to run for president. Well, I knew better than that. My father gave me something of an education before I ever started. And the idea of Menon running for president before he'd gotten his feet wet as the governor was ridiculous. But you know, Larry Farrell and some of those people were shoving him to the front all the time. And Menon, I always appreciated the fact that I didn't buy it, because I just said I didn't think it made any sense. And they wanted him to run for senator before he'd hardly gotten himself into his governorship. He was completely absorbed in that governorship, as he should have been.
Yeah.
And he was doing things for the state of Michigan as had never been done. And it didn't make any sense to me to worry about what he was going to be doing 10 years from now. That wasn't the point. The point was what we did today and tomorrow and the next day.
You felt he really enjoyed being governor, is that correct?
Oh, yes. Menon loved being governor. And he taught Nancy to love being the governor's wife. He never neglected his home. One of the things I remember that's personal about Governor Williams, he tried to give one night at home every week so he could be with Nancy and the children. He tried very hard. And if he failed, it was a big disappointment not only to the children and Nancy, but to him. But I can remember him nabbing me and saying, "Adelaide, I got something to tell you. I went to the movie last night," and then he'd tell me what the movie was all about. and as if it had made any difference, but he'd tell me all about the movie. And I used to think it was pathetic in a way, because he was a young man absorbed in his family and his children, and he had to be gone so much. But Nancy was a good sport about it. And of course, she went with him when she could, and they always had people who were at the house taking care of the children. But of course, that isn't enough, and both of them felt that. They both felt they owed the children a lot, and their children proved it. They're wonderful kids.
They had at the reception for Helen birth a lot. Nancy was there and some of the children.
Oh, yes,
too.
she would be.
Now,
she was here for the party last week.
Yes. Now, the ones that around Menon, you knew well, Paul Weber, John Murray, did you know them?
Did I know them? I know them and loved them. Paul Weber I knew before he ever before he ever met Menon Williams. Paul was the president of the Wage Earner. He put out the Wage Earner, which went all over the United States. Even Congress sent for the paper. And he put me on the board of the, not the Wage Earner, but the organization. And it was something that I valued. Paul would call me and he'd say, "Adelaide, are you coming to the meeting tonight?" And I'd say, "Yes, I am, Paul." "Leave your car at home, take the bus down, and you and I will take the rest of them who need to be taken home. We'll take them home." So that I would do. I would leave the car at home, and I would drive down, and Paul, and we'd sit through the whole meeting. And then Paul, there were those who didn't have any way of getting home. And Paul said, we'll take you home. And so we did. Well, that's when I got to know Paul better than any time. You know, he wasn't very strong. He used to have some awful serious illnesses. When he was doing that work, he tested his heart way beyond what he should have done. But when Paul took a rap out of the communists all the time. But when Paul did it, he was a true newspaper man. He would call them up and read what he had written. And if there were changes that he felt that where he'd made a mistake and he should change it, he would do that. But he didn't change it just to please them. And it was a marvelous experience to work with him, because Paul was he was a deeply religious man, but he also was a very human person, and he had the best sense of humor. I never knew anybody with a better sense of humor than Paul had, and Paul used it with the governor too.
Remember one of Paul Weber's comments was the communist idea of a partial committee was one communist, one fellow traveler, and one dumb American. He had that great sense. And how about John Murray? Did you work with him much?
Oh, well, you know, Paul got John to work with Neil and me. And John was a very serious, he was with the Free Press when I first knew him. And John was serious, very serious, a very lovely person. And he set us straight. That's what Paul wanted, to be sure. We weren't always sure about what we were saying or what we were doing might be to the public. And John could always advise us. And John was a great advisor because he wasn't always advising us to shut up. He was advising us to do something that was constructive. And he could show us how to put what we were working on in constructive terms. I'm very anxious. I'm still very anxious to meet this young man.
John's son is Mark Murray, and he's now the acting director of management and budget. He'd wanted to come up, but they're so busy on the state budget.
Well, sure, he can't.
But he did help work out questions and guidance. He's on the committee that's working on the Michigan Political History Society. Yeah. Now, how about appointments? What about the matter of racial appointments and ethnic appointments? What do you remember on those?
On appointments?
Yes, whether blacks should be appointed or ethnic groups. Oh,
I remember riding home in a car. I think, I can't remember whether Menon was driving it, but do you remember the chairman, a black chairman of the 13th District? He was, I cannot think of his name. I've been trying to for ages. He was a dear little man, very good, a good chairman.
Not Harold Bledsoe.
Pardon?
No, that was, no, I don't remember.
I can't remember his name to save my, he died. I remember going to the funeral, but we came home one night and he was arguing in behalf of, let me see, I was arguing on behalf of a black for something or other, and he was arguing for one man who was on the county committee, a white man. And we came all the way back with Menon, with this fellow arguing for a white man, and me arguing for a black man, and Menon being kind of dumbfounded by the two of us. But it was like that. That was one of the things that I tried to do when I became head of the women. Well, Neil and I did it too. We went into the black areas and had meetings with them. We'd go to anybody who had any outfit there that had a good name, and then we would try to get them to get their people working with us. And I did that with the women.
Do you remember Wade McCree being appointed?
Who?
Wade McCree being appointed to the circuit
Oh,
court.
that was a wonderful appointment.